Okay, hello and welcome everybody to today's meeting of the Area Planning Committee, not Area Planning anymore, Planning B. My name's Councillor Hollier. I'm the chair of the committee this evening. You'll see on either side of the tables, we've got the remainder of the committee and up at the top of the tables, we've got various planning, legal, democracy officers. And if I could ask if you could just introduce yourselves and your title when you first speak. Be aware we've got two items on the agenda this evening. We'll start with the Morrell House application. We'll hear from the officers a quick update, any information that's particularly relevant. We'll have questions from the committee just on the plans. We'll then hear from our public speakers, followed by another opportunities for any questions from members to the officers. And then eventually we'll get to a section of debate and eventually a decision, hopefully. So if I could ask if any members have any declarations of interest. Councillor Melly, then Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I have a prejudicial interest in item 4A, so I'll leave the room when that application is being discussed and decided. Okay.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Yeah, just for transparency, really, I just wanted to note that it's always hard to define this, isn't it? I have met the applicant for 4A in social settings on 2 or 3 occasions over the last few years. We move in similar social circles. We've never discussed this application. I hadn't made the connection actually until coming into the room. So I don't consider it to be any sort of prejudicial or predetermination or anything like that, but I just wanted to be completely transparent.
Okay, thank you. I'll just note as well, we've got apologies from Councillor Crackhill and Councillor Duggan substituting, so welcome. If we move on then to the minutes of the last meeting, we're all happy for me to sign those as a correct record. Can't see any objections, so I'll take that as a yes, so I'll sign those shortly. We've no speakers under the general public participation section of the committee, so we can move straight on then to the plans list. And Becky, if you're happy to start with. Oh, sorry. I'm just being reminded we need a vice chair for the first item. So is anybody willing to suggest? Anybody? Councillor Crawshaw's done it before. Happy to?
I'm happy to. Yeah. Okay,
fantastic. That's just in case we come to a point of delegating anything later to chair and vice chair. Yeah, so move on then to item 4A.
Thank you, Chair. Becky Eads, Head of Planning and Development Services. First item you're considering is Morrell House at 388 Burton Lane, York. The proposals for the renovation and change of use of the former care home to create 12 flats with shared amenities and 1 5-6 person HMO. Members saw this site yesterday on a virtual site visit. So this is Morrell House from the northwest, southwest, and this is the access into the site. You can see the site outlined in red here, just where my pointer is. And site layout plan here, see the buildings within it here. And the proposed elevations, you can see the solar panels to the roof and each of the elevations here. Again, these are the proposed floor plans. These are all in your packs for you to have a look at, and cross sections and the landscaping plan. There is no other update for this proposal, so that's it from us. Thank you very much.
Okay, any questions on the plans from councillors? Councillor Crawshaw.
Just one quick question. Sorry, page 34 on the first floor plan. There was just, I couldn't see it in the detail on my drawing. There's just a sort of slightly strange arrangement. It appears to be around doors in the centre of the floor, and I think I wasn't sure whether it was a fire door or whether it was because I think it's between what are 2 separate flats. And I just wanted to understand what that was. So it's kind of what's the best way of describing it? Yeah, you've zoomed in there, and in that central corridor, there seems to be kind of a semicircle that looks like it could be a big door that goes right the way across the corridor, and then an entrance into a bedroom that sort of cross over each other. And I just couldn't quite work out what that arrangement was. But it's kind of right in the centre of the screen. To your left. If you move, sorry, to the left as I'm looking at it. So is that to your right? Yeah, to your right. Yeah. Sorry. So yes, just yeah, that bit. That arrangement of doors there.
Oh, security.
I don't know, but it looks like it would be a fire door from looking at it.
Yeah.
So I presume the
Not
intention would be that
100%
wouldn't be an accessible corridor all the way. I was trying to work out where the different entrance and exit points were to each of the flats on that floor, and I just couldn't quite work out what that arrangement was.
Can't see from that far. I'll work it out for you in a minute.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions? If there's no further questions, then we might be able to ask the applicants. You might be able to help us there. Looks like you can. So I think we can move on to public speakers then. So we've got James Neward, who's the Director of Operations, and also Rebecca Woolley, who I think is just here to answer questions if needed. But yeah, if you'd like to join us at the table. Yep, hopefully, you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. I'll give you a warning with about
Thank you,
30
Chair.
seconds to go.
Yeah, can I share the 3 minutes with my colleague Becca, if that's okay?
Yeah, okay.
So my name is James Seed. I'm representing Your Space, and I'm here with a member of our development partner and resident group, Morrell Housing Co-op, Becca Woolley. As a community land trust, Your Space is pleased to be supporting the development of another pioneering community-led housing project in the city, continuing our mission to identify suitable sites for low-cost, low-carbon housing, ensuring that their design is shaped and led by the residents that will live there, building community, lowering carbon emissions, ensuring long-term affordability. With the resident group, we've used One Planet Living principles to embed sustainability within the project, aligning with City of York Council's declaration of the climate emergency. Morrell House offers a great opportunity to recycle and retrofit an existing building to achieve high standards of energy efficiency, using existing infrastructure to avoid carbon emissions associated with the industry standard approach of knock down and start again. Similarly to our first scheme at Lowfield Green, we will lock land into community ownership through our Community Benefit Society to avoid homes finding their way onto the open market. However, this time we will partner with a registered provider to access funding and adopt a rental model to provide housing at local housing allowance and affordable rent levels, working closely with City of York Council's affordable housing team, and our partners, Morrell Housing Co-op, will offer an antidote to the ever-escalating housing affordability crisis in York. Hand over to Becca.
Hi, I'm Becca. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to introduce ourselves. I'm representing Morrell Housing Cooperative. We're a cooperative of York residents who became part of this project because of our desire to live in a friendly, sharing community where we help each other out and look after our collective assets. Many of us are motivated to join as we care about our local environment, and we see cooperative housing as a way to live more sustainably. We've all been an active part of the consultation process, which was held at Morrell House itself, which was great. And this created a sense of responsibility to the local area and to the building. We hope to see this currently unused space become a thriving hub for us to live in and for the community around it. It's been exciting to work with James in Your Space and to explore sustainable methods of retrofitting, which make our lifestyles more affordable and more fulfilling. The cooperative's goal is ultimately to create community resilience in our co-op, in Burton Green and in York. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you. And I'll just ask if the committee have any questions. So Councillor Morrell, Councillor de Gaulle.
Thank you. And hallelujah, you're refitting a building instead of knocking it down, which is what we normally get. Just looking at your allocations, it says 2 of the flats are going to be affordable permanently. How will the rest be organised?
Yeah, so I think that was on our minimum requirement to provide 2 affordable units, but we're going to work closely with the City of York Housing and Affordable Housing team. We've been working with Andrew Bedrington, as well as the community-led housing officer, Tim Moon, to develop a model where the allocations will be centered around people on housing needs. So we want to provide units that are around local housing allowance and find ways in which we can draw down Homes England grant, which will require us to be partnering with a registered provider. So that's the route that we're going to take moving forward once we've gained the planning permission.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, councillor Gall.
Mine was on a similar point, but just to clarify the mechanism that you have identified to ensure that they remain affordable beyond the initial three-year period, which I think is referred to.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in our 3 minutes there, the model will be adopting, because Your Space is a community land trust and community benefit society. Currently, community land trusts are exempt from the right to acquire. So through that mechanism, combined with partnering with the housing co-op to manage the properties, the allocations process will ensure that because Your Space will own the land and buildings and the co-op will basically be the stewards of the site, that sort of double asset lock will ensure that the homes just stay permanently affordable.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming to speak to us this evening. I'm just going to put you that question about the doors or whatever's going on. If you could just
I was
clarify.
frantically waving, but I didn't know if it was appropriate. Yes, so what you picked up there, so eagle-eyed Councillor Crawshaw, is what that is further down the line. It was to look at whether we could bring in some flexibility between having a 2-bed or a 3-bed within the development. It's something that we'll develop with building control as we go forward. But yeah, it was to bring in design in some flexibility of how, depending on the makeup of the resident group that Becca and the other colleagues develop, the suitability for 2-3-bed units. I think they're predominantly 1 and 2 beds, but I think that might be the 1 3-bed that we could switch back to a 2-bed if required. That was the thinking. So well spotted.
Okay, any further questions? I can't see any, so thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any further questions then for officers? If not, if we're happy to move to debate, Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I think that this is a really, really positive application. It appears to be offering effectively 100% affordable housing, reusing existing space, bringing things back into use, the allocation of parking spaces and being clear about people using cars only when they need them and having a carpool, that sort of thing. I think these are all things which I would hope in future developments will become quite normal, actually, but you know, still feel a bit groundbreaking, unfortunately, even though it's 2023. But I would have absolutely no hesitation in moving the officer recommendation on this, and I think we want to see more of this sort of thing.
Okay, anybody willing to second? Councillor Perrott.
Yeah, I'm happy to second it, and I think on that basis of affordability, I think it's a different way of doing things, and it's quite an exciting development.
Okay, any further debate, Councillor?
I just want to agree with that particular point about welcoming the flexibility to reuse an existing building to upgrade it in terms of environmental standards, but also provide affordable accommodation through an approach which meets community needs and helps to provide diversity in the types of approach that we adopt to offering affordable housing. And as has been said, you know, for the emphasis on communal living and giving people the opportunity to share transport and to minimise the impact in a sustainable location, which is all very welcome.
Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, I fully support the proposal. The only thing I have got slight concern about is in the conditions. Condition 5, it just says land 1 in new landscape details, and condition 10, land contamination expected contam. Are those sort of standard conditions then? Or have somebody just forgotten to type the rest of the conditioning?
They are standard conditions. One is requiring a landscape scheme within a certain duration of the start of development, and the second is to cover the eventuality that there might be unexpected contamination appear during the development process.
Thank you. Put my mind at rest.
Okay, thank you. There's no further debate then. If I could ask Becky, if you could just give us a sort of summary of
Yep.
what people are voting on.
So the recommendation is for approval, subject to a section 106 agreement that secures the 2 affordable units. Just go back so I'm fully clear for you. Renovation and change of use as former care home to create 12 flats with shared amenities and a HMO. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, could I see all those in favour? Okay, so that's unanimous, so that's approved. Okay, thank you very much. You're obviously very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you'd like to escape, then this is your chance, but don't go out through that door, I think is the. Yes. Okay, thank you. Welcome back, Councillor Melly as the Vice Chair again, and if we can move on then to 4B.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for the erection of one dwelling to the rear of the Lord Nelson at 9 Main Street, Nether Poppleton. So you can see the site photographs here. Here's the rear of the site. The location of plot 2. You can see the neighbouring property there. View towards 2 Holgarth Close. View towards Poppleton House. And this is your proposed site plan here. Let me just get the, there you go. So main road here, Lord Nelson, access into the site here with a proposal just where I'm circling here. And there was previously an application for 2 dwellings, which includes this one here, that was allowed at appeal. And just for your reference, that is the one that was previously consented here. I'll show you the elevations in a second. So the proposal of this new proposal is for, again, a detached dwelling, single-storey elements with a 2-storey section in the middle. You can see that in relation to the neighbouring properties here and here. And then the floor plans. And this isn't in your pack, so you will need to look at that. This is the previously approved single-storey dwelling that was approved at appeal. So that's approved, that's the proposed. And again, site plan, you can see that the previously consented had a larger footprint, which is then reduced, but you've now got a 2-storey element in here. There's no further update to that one. Thank you very much.
Okay, if there's any questions from the committee on the plans, Councillor Orrell.
The update we've just got from objections says that trees have been removed effectively without permission.
I've literally only just got this the same time as you, so I can't really comment. Just from looking at the plans, it could be that and from what the response that we've had, it looks like here that it's removal of scrub. I can't comment. I haven't seen it in long enough to be able to comment on it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Melly.
So is the scheme that currently has approval for the site, is it 2 dwellings? And this
Yes.
one's 1 dwelling?
It's part, so obviously they're not changing the first one, which is there. This one that was part of the original. This is just to change this plot, which was plot 2 of the original one that was allowed at appeal.
Okay, any further questions? Not, if we can move on then to our public speakers. The first is Richard Harper, who's speaking in objection, if you'd like to join us. Well, yeah, we should know you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. I'll give you a warning about 30 seconds. But if you'd like to make a
Before I
start.
start, could I just point out that even on your pictures, you could see there a great pile of vegetation that's been ripped out. And again, it's
Okay.
it shouldn't have been. Okay. So I'm here to represent the residents of Nether Poppleton. In 2018 and 2020, a plan for a two-storey house was rejected by both York City Planning Committee and by Nether Poppleton Parish Council. The objections made then remain the same and should be taken into account when making a decision about this proposal. A design for a single-storey flat roof building was again rejected by this committee as well as Nether Poppleton Parish Council. An appeal to the Secretary of State was made. The new plan for a two-storey house was submitted even before York City Council could notify objectors of the Secretary of State's decision. The appeal to the Secretary of State was upheld as this single-storey flat roof building would cause, and I quote, least possible harm to the surrounding area. Paragraph 24 of the appeal decision states that the single-storey flat roof building would do less than substantial harm to the conservation area because of the limited public views, the height in relation to Poppleton House, and the mixed character of houses and surroundings. A two-storey building is at odds with this outline permission. The granting of permission came with certain conditions. Paragraph 33, the Secretary of State states that it found it necessary to impose condition, specifying the approved plans for this, and as this provides certainty. Paragraph 35 states the developer should preserve and protect existing trees and character. All of the trees and shrubs have been bulldozed out and left in a large pile. As I'm informed, no arboreal method statement, as insisted upon within paragraph 13 of the schedule of conditions, has been made. York Civic Trust, in association with York University, are currently researching the connection of the Lord Nelson with the Battle of Marston Moor. Paragraph 15, sections D and D, suggests that an archaeological report should be made. The significant change from a single-storey flat roof bungalow to a two-storey development will have an impact on the area. It does not meet the housing needs any more than a single-storey building. Its design, it's at odds to its surrounding developments. It damages the heritage of the area and does nothing to help local economy or provide jobs. All clean planning objectives. In addition, the height of the building and the rise of the ground from Main Street will mean the structure will be visible from Millfield Lane and the grade 2 listed buildings opposite the Lord Nelson. The latest plan was presented to Nether Poppleton Parish Council and rejected unanimously. Prospective councillors have stated that they want local people to have a stronger voice when it comes to planning. The parish council and many objectors are local people, and I hope this committee will provide this stronger voice and reject this and any further plans for this site. I feel this plan was designed to circumvent the conditions imposed by the Secretary of State.
Okay, thank you.
Could I
I'll
just
hang on, you've
Sorry.
got 3 minutes. Just ask if the committee have any questions. No, if not, thank you for your time.
Could I just ask a question? So I was talking to someone and they said to me that things had already been approved and they'd got that information from the evening press. Having read the article,
I suspect the York Press very often suggests that things are set to be approved
I just
when-
wondered whether the information had come from the planning department or from someone else.
No, it's a comment we've made to them previously, but
Right.
okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
To rejoin the public gallery. Thank you. We could move on then to our next speaker, who's Paul Harper.
Right. I'm afraid I need to start with a couple of apologies. Firstly, last time I sat in this chair, I misled the committee regarding the extent of the community asset listing. I was totally unaware that splitting the pub grounds into 3 distinct plots would also effectively split that listing. It would also be fair to say that I wasn't alone in this, but as the planning officer stated, he believed that there was a boundary to it, but he didn't know where it was. Despite this being a key feature of objections to many of the proposed schemes for this site, its scope and implications were only investigated on the morning of the committee meeting. This from the officers who were beholden to be on top of the details to make informed decisions. The same loose approach to the actual facts of the case lead me to my second apology for inappropriately shouting out during the last meeting. I just couldn't contain myself as we listened repeatedly to the direct lie that this was a brownfield site. In the introduction, it was correctly identified as a white site. So attempting to program us all to believe that it was a brownfield site was a very clever lie. Brownfield has no legal standing in planning, but we all know that colloquially it's taken to mean a site being previously developed and therefore needn't be protected. With all that in mind, I move on to the current proposal. This is a new planning application, but it still has an effect on the conservation area in a grade 2 listed building. As such, as a requirement for a heritage asset statement. There's never been a heritage asset statement for a 2-storey building on this part of the site. This omission is maybe just another missed detail in the recommendation to approve. All we know definitively is that a 2-storey proposal was deemed to result in unduly prominent developments, which compounded with rising levels from Main Street would draw undue attention from outside the site. That was supported by this committee, the Secretary of State, the Parish Council and the community. The applicant rails against the questions raised about their competence and conduct questions, which is why, and questions why the financial incentive to circumnavigate planning rules would be relevant. As you see in the handout you've got, the RIBA are very explicit about why these points are very relevant. This same disregard for the conditions set out with the planning process means there's already an open enforcement case on this particular part of the existing scheme. Again, on the handouts, there's photographic proof of the breaches of the Secretary of State's planning conditions. So now the key question, what's the point in this application? As we're all aware, the previous scheme passed only because York could not prove a 5-year housing supply. The one dwelling proposed here will already have been counted within the SHLAA, so there's clearly no benefit to the council or residents of York. A second story, no matter how you cut it, will cause more harm to the conservation area and the setting of Poppleton House. So there's no benefit to the community or its protected assets. Last time we were here, we all heard the previous scheme was the best conceivable for the sites, which was either dishonest or inherently this is a worse scheme than its predecessor. However, if this is passed, then some very strict community protections and conditions put in place by the Secretary of State are lost, as we've all seen in the document today, which may benefit only one party to the detriment to everyone else. So overall, the best outcome for the majority of stakeholders in this is refusal, which given the current state of the scheme, the missing relevant documentation is what you'd expect from Secretary of State level 2. But in the 1 in a million chance they're willing to prove it, at least the robust conditions would still be reinforced. Was that 3 minutes? I've really tried my best. I'm sorry.
Just a little bit long. Yeah, I'll just ask if the committee have any questions. Councillor Melly.
What conditions were imposed by the Secretary of State on the previous appeal decision that you feel would be appropriate?
Removal of permitted development is quite a big one.
That is a condition, a recommended condition.
Was it on there? I couldn't see it on there. Sorry, I only got about 30 seconds to look through it. Another thing was retain the hedgerows, which, as we can all see, have gone. Putting arboreal things in so that people know what's on the site before it's decimated. That's gone. It's a bit late now, obviously. I'm just trying to, sorry, it's really difficult about the paperwork in front of you, isn't it? But there's a lot of, it just felt really strong from the Secretary of State, and it doesn't feel quite as, it feels a bit more loose than this, to be honest.
Can I just check officers, is condition 14, does that remove permitted development rights?
Yes.
Thank you.
The condition to remove permitted development right is condition 14 in this. No, it's here.
Okay, any further questions? Can't see any further questions, so I'll thank you for your time this evening. Thank you. We move on then to councillor Anne Hook, who's the ward councillor. Yep, if you'd like to make a start in your own time.
Thank you, and I really apologise for the sense of déjà vu because we've all been here before. Unfortunately, the planning system is weighted in favour of the developer, and this is a textbook case. An application is refused, so it's amended to a single-storey property. It's refused again, so it goes to appeal. The appeal gives approval, but the developer isn't satisfied. After trying to sell the land for a huge sum, the developer is trying again to get approval for a two-storey building. A building that, given the elevation of the land it will be sited on, which was not made clear in the photos that you were given because it's level with the roofs of the houses across the road. It's a really high elevation. It would dominate the surrounding area and adversely affect the conservation area. The developer thinks we will give up, but residents who care about the conservation area and the setting of its listed buildings will keep opposing the development as long as they can. So, when I had planning training, we were told that someone's view could not be protected. But we were told that a view enjoyed by a community could be protected as a valid planning grounds. This is such a view. Also, things have changed since the original application was made. Under new management, the Lord Nelson is now a thriving pub and people come from far and wide to eat there. The pub desperately needs its former car parking area to be restored. The lack of car parking space caused by the proposed development means that Main Street is often congested by parked vehicles using the pub. This causes problems for the number 10 bus, which has its terminus almost opposite outside the pub. And it causes problems for other residents of Main Street and for any other vehicle, especially large ones, passing down Main Street. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask if there's any questions. See Councillor Melly and Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Chair. How would this development specifically affect those kind of traffic pressures that you were just describing compared to the already approved development?
Not a lot. It's just that the situation's changed, and if we're back to square one, I might as well raise it because it is a valid planning, a traffic problem now. It's a real problem for neighbours.
I completely sympathise with people living there and wanting to rely on bus services or their car and being stuck in congestion, but we're not at square one. We're having to look at this application and the impacts of this application specifically. So is there anything you can tell us about how it affect vehicle movements or?
Well, the area behind the Lord Nelson did have basically it was, you could park anywhere really. You had loads of spaces for cars, but it's been really restricted, and it's even less than what you think because you've got to allow for dray lorries and other vehicles supplying it that are quite long to be able to turn. So basically, the pub is now thriving. There's a lot more people using it. They're not just Poppleton residents, because when you come to eat, and the pub's now been in the York press, so people know about it, they're coming from much farther, so they drive. And it's just causing big issues. So I wanted to raise that.
Okay, Councillor, sorry, we've got Councillor, sorry, is this a supplementary? Or no? We'll go to Councillor Crawshaw, then Councillor Galvin.
Thanks, Chair. Unfortunately, all those points around the pub, which I think were points that we all argued last time around, that boat has sailed. This is approved, so that first building is going to get built on the pub car park anyway.
Yeah, but you've got more traffic going up and down.
Well, you've got traffic that will go to that one potential second building, which also has approval. That's the problem that we've got here.
But I thought I'd better.
So what I just wanted to clarify was on your call-in, you've said that the approval of a second story would conflict with national and local planning policies. And I just wondered if you could tell us which ones you think it will clash with, because that's what we need to find.
The neighbourhood plan.
Sorry?
It's the Poppleton neighbourhood plan that wants to protect the conservation area and the views in the conservation area of Nether Poppleton. And it was written fully believing in good faith, because we were advised by the committee was advised by planning officers, that piece of land behind the Lord Nelson was a protected site and an open space, a green space, and couldn't be built
Planning
on.
inspectors overruled that in the appeal. And so the
Yeah.
problem that we have as a committee now is that we're looking at a
Yeah.
site that
But it
has,
is much higher,
has
isn't
all
it?
of this approved.
Yeah.
So it's, if the planning committee were minded to refuse, they would need to have clear planning reasons.
Yeah. But it
that-
can be
that
so
would be
clearly
robust.
viewed.
That's
Yeah, yeah,
the challenge that we've
yeah.
got.
But it can be really, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb because it's right up that huge elevation. If you've got a house here and the ground is level with your roof, that is going to be 2 stories above that, which is, it's going to dominate the landscape and change the view completely,
So,
causing
So-
substantial harm in
so I
planning
will,
speak.
I'll check with the planning officers around the ridge height, but I think if I'm correct, as we're looking at that at the moment, the dwelling that's next to it, that's kind of above it on the drawing, is
It's
also
not.
a
I've
two-story.
been there and it's lower. You look up towards the ground level.
Sorry, I'm maybe not describing where.
Yeah,
where
no,
I mean.
no,
So behind the pub.
Yeah,
Second one, so the application site, as we're looking at it at the minute,
yeah,
that building that's above it,
yes.
there, yeah, which.
That's
is
ground
highlighted.
level is lower than the one that's in the pub. Because I've been there and I've got a photo of the heat.
So
That's the plan.
so that's a 2-story building on the site behind, yeah. So that's why yeah, so if we got a comparison of what the 2 ridge heights will be. That might be helpful. Yeah, it's just trying to understand what the context is going to be.
So this is approximate, 2-story is 4.8 to the eaves and 7.1 to the ridge. To caveat that, your ridge comes away from the neighbouring properties on that, and it's only on that element there. Previous approval was approximately 4.5. So there's a difference of 2.6 meters. I've worked it out. 2.6, approximately 2.6 meters difference in height between the flat roof and the very top ridge. So if you look, it's right to the top of that ridge, but as I say, the ridge faces away from the neighbours. So that's the very top point. That's the ridge that I've referenced. And you can see the neighbouring properties there.
Yeah, so it's the ridge height between the neighbouring and.
I don't know the ridge height of the neighbouring property, sorry, I don't have that.
Okay.
But we've got these plans here as well.
Okay, councillor Gowland.
Mike.
It's flashing, it's not working.
Stop this one.
Given where we are with the planning inspector, I hesitate to use the word legitimate, but the only legitimate complaint, in as much as a complaint that has not been covered by the planning inspector, is purely this question of height. The rest is in essence has been dismissed by the planning inspector. Do you agree with that?
He didn't know about the situation. He didn't know the situation of the pub at the time.
Well, that's totally wrong.
Right.
Okay,
Something meters, that's really what the argument is about, nothing else.
okay,
Because you ain't going to change as it stands. They can build that second house anyway, so nothing is going to change other than, did you say 1.3 meters, Beth?
2.6.
2.3 meters. We're talking about 2.3 meters.
It's a
Plus
tall
the
person.
fact,
Plus
plus
the-
the fact,
councillor,
the distances.
we're just straying a bit.
Sorry,
too
I
vague here.
apologise.
This is,
I'm my mouth's running away with me. I apologise.
we could try and keep it to questions to councillor Hook.
I've finished. I mean, you've made the point. I mean, you've answered the question.
Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. What are the kind of key features and characteristics of the conservation area, visually and architecturally? And
Oh, it's the listed buildings. It's got several. Number 15's listed. That big house that you saw, that's a listed building in that photo. Poppleton House, that one. That's a listed building. There's a whole load. What?
The buildings,
Sorry.
the buildings opposite,
Sorry,
No.
could you please return to the public gallery? This isn't.
Yeah. There's some building opposites, Ferry Cottage, which is one of the ones that the land is at the height of the roof of Ferry Cottage across the road. That's a listed building. 20 Main Street, that's even further down because it's near the river. That's going to be totally dwarfed by it. And Saxdane House also down by the river. So there's a lot. And number 15, which is sort of just the other side of Hallgarth Close.
And you said in your 3 minutes that you felt that there would be harm to the conservation area.
Yes.
Do you feel that the harm of this application would be greater to the conservation area than the harm of the already approved application, or is it the principle of development itself that you feel?
No,
would
it's
harm
yes,
the
because
conservation?
it's higher. It blocks the view.
It's that extra
Oh.
height that you feel does the
Yeah.
harm. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gore.
Just trying to clarify a bit in looking at that plan, the property which is nearest to it is quite close. It's rather small writings. I can't see what it's called, but it's obviously at the end of a cul-de-sac adjacent to, with the access from the main road. Just trying to understand, presumably that's the biggest impact is on that dwelling. But from the drawing we've just seen, the picture that shows that one there, I presume that's the building we're talking about that it's going to be closest to. And from what I can see, there's roof lights, but there's no other windows facing towards the site. Is that correct? It's downstairs behind the downstairs behind the fence, if you sort of mean. Okay. And when is there an issue about the separation distance, but presumably that the single story has got the same sort of footprint. So it's the question about the height of this with the separation distance that we're talking about. Sorry?
It's about 3.3 meters.
What distance? Oh, the height. 2.6 was what was
2.6.
But
2.6, about 8 foot.
2.3, 2.6.
Yeah.
That's what the writing.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, thank you for your time, Councillor. Okay, then we can move on then to the last speaker, who is Martin Walker. Yeah. Speaking in sport is the applicant. You've also got 3 minutes to address the committee, and I'll give you a warning about 30 seconds. But
Thank you.
Start.
Thanks for allowing me to speak at reasonably short notice. I'm speaking on behalf of my wife and I, who are as the landowners. And following successful outcome of the appeal inspectorate, it's our opinion, I think it's been said already, that this application comes down to visibility and prominence. All other matters of historical site uses, highways, landscape, drainage, access, the pub, they're all immaterial now. No objections have been raised by the council's conservation department to our proposals. The appeal decision helpfully clarified a number of key points which were previously questions, these being the principle of 2 dwellings on the site, the position of the dwellings on the site, the acceptance of both traditional and contemporary design solutions, both having their merits and being appropriate, the principle of 2-story, and the acceptance of the proposals impacting on the adjoining listed building and conservation area setting. This application is about a change to the design of the rear house. The footprint has been reduced and the height of the house has been increased to a part 2-story, part 1-story, which is commensurate to surrounding houses. The reduction in footprint of the house decreases the impact on the amenity of number 2 Hallgarth and properties on Littlefield Close. The house will sit behind an already approved 2-story dwelling. We've taken a different approach to the design, adopting a more traditional agricultural style, using traditional materials, conventional roof pitches, and a natural grouping of single and 2-story elements. As confirmed by the inspectorate in their own words, there are only glimpsed views of the scheme, and these limited views are seen in the context of the surrounding built development. The inspector confirmed that the 2-story house to the front would not be unduly prominent.
This is due to its height and scale of existing development, mature vegetation, trees, as well as the distance from the highways. Given that the two-storey element, the development towards the front of the site has already been approved, a two-storey traditionally designed dwelling would have negligible impact on only very limited glimpsed views, and therefore we believe cannot be deemed prominent in any way. And I'm happy to take any questions on the question of site clearing, if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'll just ask if the committee do have any questions. I can't see any, so thank you for your time. Thank you. Okay, we can move back then. If there are any questions to officers from the committee. Councillor Melly.
Thanks, Chair. Condition 11 is about the arboricultural method statement. And the reason given for that condition is to protect existing trees that contribute to the amenity of the area and or development. So does that mean there are trees on site which are important to the amenity of neighbouring residents and the conservation area and screening and that sort of thing?
Yeah, because it's in a conservation area, so they're offered a level of protection for trees in a conservation area. So that's why.
So what level of protection is currently provided by trees? In terms of like what level of screening there is?
Well, you can see on there that there is some quite large trees on the site. Especially this, well, this one here. So there are trees on the site at the moment, so it's making sure that they're protected as part of the works.
So what trees are there that provide screening between this development and the nearest listed building?
You see the listed building there behind?
That's that one.
That's that one. There are these huge trees here. Well,
So
huge in my.
So in winter, it's not much screening.
Say that again?
So in winter, it's not much screening when there isn't leaves.
Well, you can see there's no leaves there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. Page 47, page 48. The officer concludes that there would be less than substantial harm to the designated heritage asset, but then concludes the harm is outweighed by the public benefit of providing additional housing in a sustainable location. Now, as I understand it, there is planning consent already for 2 dwellings on that site, and this is no more than 2 dwellings. So how can we justify the increase in harm to the heritage assets by saying there is additional housing when there is still the same number of units? I can't quite understand that.
Good question. I think we've made a balance in terms of how much the harm is and the provision of the house. And we still don't think in the terms of the planning balance that I talk to you about all the time, that it weighs sufficient harm that would then tip the balance the other way for us to recommend refusal.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? I can't see any, so if we're happy then to move into debate, and if anybody would like to make a start. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I looked right the way through the neighbourhood plan for Poppleton, and I did feel that the planning inspector, shall we say, did not pay full cognizance to the some of the points made in that in terms of the protection of the conservation area. Now, reminding ourselves that neighbourhood plans take years to do. There's a check by a planning inspector to ensure that they conform with all local planning policies and the National Planning Policy Framework. They are then supported by a referendum of the residents within the area. I just asked my question, why do we bother preparing a neighbourhood plan if the planning inspector is going to ignore it? They did this in Earswick as well, where there was a clear neighbourhood plan policy, which was overturned. And that really, really upsets me when we go through the process. And some people give up 7 years of their lives in Strensel to get a policy through, and then a planning inspector ignores it. The key thing here is nothing to do with the car parking in the pub. That's been and gone. It's about whether the increase of this building from 1 storey to 2 storey is going to have a material effect on the heritage area. And judging by the fact that this site is very high up, it is considerably elevated. If you go up that road, it's quite a considerable climb. I think it will have a significant effect on long distance views and an effect on the conservation area. And I'm afraid I cannot support it. So I shall be supporting refusal in this case. if it comes to that.
Okay, just remind members that in line with our new constitution, we move and second the officer's recommendations, and then we'll come back to that. Councillor Galvin.
Chair, it seems to me that this hinges around this height. Now, Tony said it's 2.6 meters. I think Becky said it's 3.3 meters. Because everything else has been dealt with by the building inspector. Everything else. And to be fair, just at the back of it, there's the large house that's quite substantial. I forgot what it's called now, but I have been there. I used to know somebody that lived there many years ago. It's about that bit of height. Now, it would be bizarre, quite frankly, if this is turned down. I understand where people are coming from, but those arguments have been lost. We are talking about, is it 2.6 or 3.3, Becky?
2.6.
2.6. We're talking about 2.6 meters. Now, I don't know what that is in old money, but I reckon it's probably about 8 feet. That's what we're talking about, Chair. And I think I'm right in saying, if I understand the point, that's only part of the house is 2-story, not the whole of it is 2-story. So quite frankly, all the other arguments about traffic, about conservation area, about loss of land, it's gone. It's whether we agree that 2.6 is worth throwing it out or accepting it. Because I'm not a gambling man. If we throw it out, it'll go to appeal. And I dare bet a fiver the inspector will uphold the appeal. And so, quite frankly, and I sympathise with people, don't misunderstand me, but we're talking about this as it stands, 2.6 metres. So therefore, Chair, in the absence of anybody else, and I know nobody else will move it because we're all flying to death of the latest, instructions on these things. I'll move to the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Anybody willing to second that? Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, I'm listened to what's been said, and I think, as has been said, the principle has already been established that this site through the appeal process, that this site can be developed. And so, as has been said, we're talking about increased height, but set against that, I'm looking at the report that talks about design and impact on heritage assets, paragraph 5.8, describes there the nature of what's proposed is a more traditional brick and slate appearance, more in keeping from the sort of the idiom of what one might expect in a conservation area that's been created and acknowledged the traditional style of buildings there. So, you know, although it's increasing the height, the appearance that is now in contention seems to be more in keeping with the conservation area than more modern single-story building, which has already got planning consent. So on balance, I think that you know, there's very little that we can dispute, and we have to approve this because there's little grounds on which to oppose this, recognising all that's been said about screening from trees and positioning. This is a backland development which is not sort of prominent on Main Street or anything like that. So I think on balance, you know, we have to approve it.
Are you seconding it, Andy?
Yeah. Happy to second that if you want
Okay.
to second it.
Any further debates? Councillor Crawshaw, then Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Chair. I think when this came through last time, I can't remember whether I moved or seconded a refusal. I certainly spoke against it. But as has been said, those arguments have been lost. Paragraph 5.16 on page 44 of the report, I think, sets out all the reasons why, if this committee refused this application, it would simply be overturned and costs would be awarded against the council. It's folly to suggest anything other than that. the site is surrounded by other two-storey dwellings. Right in front of it, the new building that's been approved is a two-storey building that is in front of it. It's more prominent. So if you're going to see anything from the street, you're going to see that one. There's no way that I think that a planning inspector would do anything other than overturn a refusal. And I just think it doesn't help the community to give them a false hope on it. We tried and it's been lost, and that's it.
Councillor Orrell?
Yes, just to reiterate or confirm what Councillor Fisher says, the officer says it's justifiable for additional housing. There's no additional housing, and as Councillor Fisher explained.
That's irrelevant in our life.
Okay. Any further debates? Councillor Crawshaw?
Yeah, just the point about the harm, the harm to the listed buildings was thrown out by the inspector because that was the grounds upon which we tried to refuse it previously. We said it would cause harm to the setting of the grade 2 listed building, and he suggested that that wasn't something that was upholdable.
Councillor Fisher?
Thank you, Councillor Crawshaw, but you're comparing two completely different things. One was a single-storey house, and this is a two-storey house. There is a substantial difference in the level of harm, in my opinion. Now, let's just go back to the planning history. The original application for two houses, which was two-storey, that was refused by the subcommittee. The applicant chose not to appeal it. I wonder why, because he probably knew he wouldn't get it through. So what did he do? He appealed a two-storey house and a single-storey. Remember, this house is considerably higher in the site. Well,
hang on, Councillor Galvin.
I can suggest that that is the methodology, to try it with a two-storey house on the lower site and a one-storey house. Now that has been approved, and I can quite understand a single-storey house probably been acceptable. But this is now a two-storey house, and I don't think that the level of harm can be compared. And that's why I'm standing very firmly. I will be voting yes.
Okay, thank you. Can we avoid having conversations across the table? If we can statements. Councillor Crawshaw.
I'll just point out that the two-storey house that was approved by the inspector is closer to the listed building. It's not. It 5.16 makes it clear that the inspector took into account all of the levels on the site. We've had that discussion. All of this stuff has all been discussed at this committee. We tried really hard to make a robust case for refusal. It was overturned by the inspector, so it's been lost. And I think if you try to overturn it again, it will just cost the council money, and it will give false hope to the community. I don't like it. I really don't like it, but we've got to be honest. It's going to be, if we don't approve it, it will be overturned.
Okay. Councillor
Melly. According to the report, the inspector didn't find that there was no harm to the heritage assets. It's just that they found that it was less than substantial harm and outweighed by the public benefit of providing additional housing. I agree with Councillor de Gorn. This increase in height means that this development would be more visible than the previously approved one, but the design means that the negative impact would be less. So my view is that the planning balance hasn't really changed. Now, our committee view of where that balance fell differed from what the inspector thought. But my view is that the balance hasn't changed. And so we also need to take into account the inspector's opinion, which we didn't have last time. So I'm minded to approve, even though my opinion of the development hasn't changed. We have more information now and more factors to consider.
Okay. Can't see any further hands, so if we're then happy to move to a vote. Becky, if you're happy to just give us a quick summary.
So it's an application for a single dwelling and it's recommended for approval subject to the conditions. I'm going to tell you what page they're on, but I've lost it. Subject to the conditions from page 48 onwards. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, can I see all those in favour? Did I see all those against? Okay,
That's not a voting recorded against that.
okay. So that's approved. Okay, thank you very much. So it's approved, yes. Okay. Thank you. Just give residents a minute to our meeting isn't finished, so if you're able to leave quietly, please. I'll just give the public a minute to gather their things. Okay, we can move on then to item 5, which is the planning appeal performance and decisions.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to give you a brief run through of the, it's page 67 onwards in your agenda. So this is information on appeals determined from the planning inspectorate between 1st of July and 30th of September 2022. You can see that we have had 23% allowed. From the whole of England in that similar period, it's 29%. So we're under the national percentage. We had one appeal. There was a major development. That was the application at Cherry Lane. That was determined by members at Committee A, and it was the inspector agreed with members, and it was dismissed at appeal. If you then go on to paragraph 5, you've got table 3. You can see that our previous was at a similar period was 18%. But we've gone up slightly there in terms of our figures. And then table 4 is also a useful table because it outlines the appeals decided following refusal by committee. There was 3 and all 3 were dismissed by the planning inspectorate. And then from page 71 onwards, that's the full list of and a synopsis of why the decision was made by the inspectorate. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. If there are any questions, Councillor Bushell?
Just super quick, on page 71, there's a couple of things which it says in the officer committee recommendation, it has them as approve and then appeal dismissed. I'm assuming that that's just a typo. Looking through the actual wording later on, it does suggest that the committee refused them. I'm pretty sure I remember the committee refusing
That's
them.
the officer recommendation was. to
Oh,
approve
so the
committee.
recommendation was to approve and then we refused. Yeah, apologies, I'd misread that. That makes much more sense.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'm not aware of any urgent business, so I'm happy to close the meeting now. Thank you.